Hey folks, Carolyn here with a quick note and apology. You're going to notice that my audio in the episode you're about to hear isn't quite up to our usual high standards for audio quality. That's because I goofed during a recent podcast recording session with Ebony and Anita. I just had my microphone turned off the entire time, and so we had to use backup audio for me. So my sincere apologies. Thank you for understanding, and thanks for listening. Hey friends, Carolyn here. If you enjoy listening in on our conversations each week about what's happening in the world of media and pop culture and how that impacts our larger culture, please head on over to patreon.com/femfreak and help us keep bringing FFR to you.
It feels like such a failure on the part of the people who own the franchise and the studio and Kathy and all of them to not have a larger vision of like, this is Rey's arc, and like the directors that they choose to film them and to bring them to life and to write them and all of that need to at least go by these beats. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. It's 2020 and everything sucks already. Yay! But we're back, which is not sucky. It's
exactly,
great.
It's great.
And we're here to share our feminist hot takes on pop culture, which is what you've been waiting weeks for. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two members of the Rebellion who never get enough screen time. Carolyn Pettit.
I'm very big in the expanded universe.
And Evo Wan Kenobi.
Hey, I died protecting all the little Jedi princelings.
This week, we'll be hyperspace skipping around the latest cinematic entry in the Star Wars franchise. Stay tuned to find out what we thought about the denouement of Rey, Finn, and Poe and Kylo's story, and whether the distinct lack of Baby Yoda was a problem. I'm going to say it was. Just, yeah, that's not even a question. We can't tease that because that would just...
Everybody's thinking it.
Yeah. All right. Bloop, 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 bloop. We should have a little musical interlude there.
Are we getting new theme music for 2020?
Do you know how hard it was for us to get that theme music? To get
Yeah, it was
music
real
that
hard.
I liked to begin with.
Yeah, okay.
So
I bet we
no
could just
new
steal
theme
like
2020.
70s game show theme music and no one would know.
Except for the machines.
All right.
The algorithmic machines.
Skynet. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Google, Skynet, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah. But hi, friends. I was just telling Ebony and Carolyn that I think I've forgotten how to podcast.
Same.
And because Ebony just appeared on my door.
Y'all. Normally we podcast separately, you know, and Rob puts everything together via, I don't know, dark magic.
What if it's force magic?
Whatever, it's forbidden magic. Anyway, this time I just showed up at Anita's doorstep, like for real. Didn't tell her I was coming. I just assumed she would know because of that telepathy we share that never goes wrong. Anyways, don't do that to your friends. Never, ever show up to their place.
I'm totally
letting them know that you're coming. It really is terrible. The more I wake up, the more I realize I should have been like, oh, by the way, I'll be there in an hour.
No, I mean, it's totally fine. It's just the setup is different. And so she just appeared, and I thought she was my neighbor, like, doing laundry or something. And then I was like, oh, it's you.
She was very happy after the first second of surprise. After the law of surprise. That's another episode.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Coming up next week. Bullshit on bullshit. What? But I was expecting Carolyn to be behind you, and that didn't happen. So work on your magics. Aren't you? Be the stereotype, Ebony.
I'll tell you what, I would, you know, the girls who didn't ascend in Aratusa who got turned into eels that we'll talk about next week. That definitely would be me. I definitely would have been turned into a glowing worm. I would not have graduated.
That's an Easter egg in case people are not clear what we're talking about next
listen,
week.
Our three listeners are all a bunch of geeks. Everybody's watching The Witcher.
All right. Carolyn, would you like to have intro banter before we move on to the main segment?
I think you've covered the intro banter thing. We can move on now.
All right. 2019 Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker wraps up the story begun 4 years ago in The Force Awakens. This latest film walks back some of the key developments of the middle film in the trilogy, The Last Jedi. But director Rian Johnson is too busy basking in accolades for Knives Out to give a shit. The Rise of Skywalker's been out for a few weeks now, so we'll venture deep into spoiler territory for this episode, so listeners beware. If you don't want to know whether Finn and Poe ever pledge their eternal devotion to each other, if you don't want to know whether Rey ever finds out who her parents are, if you simply do not want to know whether two random women kissing in the background of a crowd shot counts as LGBT representation, then turn off the pod now. But actually don't, because this is going to be good.
It is.
All right, so this is a movie that happened. Little synopsis here. Did you actually write this, or did you copy
No,
and
I
paste
stole it from the internet. This movie did not deserve a synopsis.
So, quote from something. When it's discovered that the evil Emperor Palatine.
Palpatine?
You have to say
the
Palpatine,
rails.
right? Or the Star Wars
I am
nerds
so
are
tired.
descend.
Palpatine.
Palpatine.
Palpatine. Jesus Christ. Keep all that in because I don't give a fuck because I never watched the prequels. Palpatine. I'm just going to do something really quick for my own sake.
Did you miss us, listeners?
All right. This old weird dude didn't die at the hands of Darth Vader. The rebels must race against the clock to find out his whereabouts. Finn and Poe lead the resistance to put a stop to the First Order's plans to form a new empire, which apparently is called the Final Order, because that's very creative. While Rey anticipates her inevitable confrontation with Kylo Ren. Okay. Who wants to start?
I think Carol should start.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think she'll set the tone.
Well, I'm fascinated, and dismayed, but also fascinated by the way that these films have clearly become, they've taken on the weight of like larger statements in our culture about what it is that we even want from our stories. And I think we see that really clearly in the extremely heated and very political, when you get right down to it, arguments, you could say, about, say, The Last Jedi versus this film, The Rise of Skywalker, because, The Last Jedi was one kind of statement. And, this is not to say that it was a good or not a good film, but its ideology was very clearly in a particular place. It was saying, like, throw away the past, kill it if you have to. It was saying, like, old lightsabers and dynasties and legacies and all these things, shouldn't be what really matters. And then The Rise of Skywalker is very much a statement that says, no, fuck you. Actually, all of that stuff is exactly what matters. And we should keep looking to the past, and we should keep kind of bringing things full circle rather than breaking those circles. And so, it's just like on a philosophical and ideological level, I'm just so fundamentally and deeply opposed to everything that this movie kind of stands for, right? Everything it does, the way that it makes, it takes Rey from being the child of nobodies, who still is like tremendously important in shaping what happens, to being like, no, she's totally actually part of all of these legacies and these dynasties. She's a Palpatine, so that's why she gets her powers from. I mean, especially like when you consider that the final image of The Last Jedi was this, I think, really evocative and powerful image of, I think he's been colloquially referred to as like Broom Kid. This poor kid on this planet of excess and wealth, using the Force. Like, that was the final image there. And really the final image of this film is for me the biggest problem with it. And so Andrew, I'm going to go on just a little bit longer. Andrew Todd in Slash Film wrote a piece that I think is right on the nose and is really, really important. So for me and a lot of other people, like, what's been always most interesting about Rey has been her loneliness and the way that the films, talk about her loneliness. And so this film ends with Rey, in the desert alone. And so Andrew Todd in Slash Film wrote, for anyone who's struggled with isolation or loneliness, this ending is absolutely crushing. It tells those people that no matter what they do, they'll always be alone, that their closest companions will die, and through Ben's absence, the person with whom they connected most intimately will be straight up forgotten. It confirms deep, terrible fears final images mean a lot, and this final image is damaging and hurtful. It made all the crueler because Rey's passed over in favor of cramming in yet another bit of Star Wars iconography. You're told that in its ultimate cinematic statement, it tells you you'll just end up alone anyway in another desert surrounded by ghosts. And like that to me was right on. I hated everything about this film, but most of all, the ending felt like a huge betrayal, and it felt like JJ only did it because he was more concerned with bringing things full circle with like the beginning of Luke's journey in A New Hope than he was with breaking out of that circle and actually giving Rey and this film the ending that it should have had.
Yeah, to pull this out a little bit, I think like it's very clear that that the studio did not have a plan for the trilogy, right? That it was at the whim of the directors. And then ultimately it became some kind of pissing contest between Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams in terms of their political perspectives on where they wanted the story to go. And, that's why everyone is talking about like J.J. changed everything from like took away everything from Rian Johnson's his vision for the film. So that's why partly why it's so jarring is these individuals got to make choices about what Star Wars should be and what direction it should go. And like, regardless of what you agree with or don't agree with in either of them, I'm like, it feels like such a failure on the part of the people who own the franchise and the studio and Kathy and all of them to not have a larger vision of like, this is Rey's arc and like the directors that they choose to film them and to bring them to life and to write them and all of that need to at least go by these beats.
Right.
And so it just, and so in a time, like I'm glad you brought up the politics of this, Carolyn, because in a time where like media is so politicized, it's such a battleground, right? In a way that is kind of is kind of silly, but also kind of serious at the same time. Like it feels like such a failure to address or acknowledge or realize that that's what's going to happen here.
Right. And, my experience of watching this film was interesting because I couldn't not bring the baggage of those larger conversations into the cinema with me. And so, for instance, very early on, you have this situation where Poe Dameron is being like super reckless as a flyboy hotshot pilot and hyperspace skipping around to like escape from some First Order people or final, I don't remember, but he's hyperspace skipping around and like somebody I forget who, but somebody says like, well, Leia wouldn't approve of this, and he retorts, well, yeah, but she's not here, is she? And immediately I'm like, did they write that like specifically to wink to the fanboys who hated The Last Jedi for its supposed, and I'm putting massive air quotes around this, like feminism of having Poe kind of taken down a notch by people like Leia and Admiral Holdo, and here like now he can like revel in being a reckless hotshot flyboy again, and so those audience people who read into that some, SJW bullshit feel vindicated and like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's right, Poe. Yeah, you are a reckless fighter pilot. That's what makes you cool. Like, I couldn't like, and that sort of thing was kind of happening constantly throughout the movie. Is like, I can't just watch this as a film about these characters in this universe anymore. Like, because I'm aware that it has these larger dimensions for so many people, for so many other people. I'm constantly thinking, well, how are the worst viewers going to interpret this, basically? And it's hard not to feel like they, like, in many ways, it deliberately wants the worst viewers out there to feel like they're being listened to and catered to.
Yeah, and the internal inconsistency of what you're talking about is such a huge part of the problem, right? Like Poe committed mass treason in the last movie, and all of a sudden he's the next in line, and like everyone has forgiven him and everything is fine. Like that feels awkward to me. Poe,
you mean in a world where Kylo Ren has the world's quickest redemption arc?
Yeah, yes, but also like in addition to all of the other things, I think I'm just like, wait a minute, weren't we mad? Wasn't he in, like, why is he the next in line? Is it because everybody fucking died and there's nobody else? Like, that seems a little, I don't know. It didn't seem right to me. And also, like, let's get into the whole, like, JJ literally created a character to show that Poe is straight. Like, Zori Bliss is the bounty hunter or whatever she is on the planet that they go to on their goddamn MacGuffin quest or whatever they're doing. And I was like, she's in the movie for all of 5 minutes. And she's played by Kerry Russell, which I'm also like, why did you agree to do this role that is totally useless? And her entire existence is to show that Poe is not gay. And like, it was extraordinarily frustrating because Poe and Oscar Isaac outright said that he played the character in the last 2 movies as queer, like as someone who is attracted to Finn and interested in Finn. And so that was so intentional. There's no way it wasn't like directly on purpose.
Well, JJ loves, tying things up in a bow to some degree, I think. And
he could have tied it up with Finn.
Yeah. I mean, that was never, I mean, that should have happened. And also it never would have happened because Disney, even if, I don't know, I just think Disney corporate
but then also
would
just
not
don't
have allowed
do
that.
it.
But let us live in the hint of it, the inference of it, rather than like denying it outright.
And I think it's made even worse by the fact that there's a lesbian kiss for 2 seconds at the very end. Like, what the fuck? Is that like here's your bone? Like,
yeah, it's exactly
what is that?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I read like a line I read in a piece. I thought summed it up so perfectly. It went something like, and I'll find this so we can link it in the show notes. It was something like, when moments like that, it's not Disney acknowledging you, or it's not Disney like celebrating you, it's Disney buying you, right? It's like they're giving you the absolute bare minimum in a self-congratulatory way, and it's garbage. But the problems for me with this film are so much bigger than that. It's also just a film that has like no, in my view, sense of stakes. If anything, it's stake, because it's constantly faking you out to the point where
it doesn't earn its moments.
Yeah,
it doesn't earn its moments
at all. There's a fake out. Early on, a major character is thought dead. We then learn, no, he's not dead. And then, in my view, much worse is the way that, in typical Star Wars fashion, a planet gets blown up, but then it doesn't. Like, it's not, it doesn't matter at all, because the only 2 characters that we know and care about from that planet, we find out, shortly thereafter, like, oh, they're fine, they made it. So, like, who cares about the planet getting blown up? Like, oh, yay, as long as cute little Babu Frick is alive, like, that's the important thing.
I mean, he was kind of great, to be fair.
No, I mean, yeah.
But yeah, totally.
Sure. Look, there's no denying that the Star Wars laboratory can concoct, cute little creatures. But I mean,
well, also fun fact. I'm assuming people know this, but the new little droid D-O or D0 or whatever.
D-O. It's pronounced D-O in the movie,
D-O.
I think. Yeah.
I don't know how it's spelled, but D-O is voiced by JJ.
Oh God, I did not know that.
Okay, here's the time for me to once again prove that I'm back on my bullshit in 2020. I saw this film, I don't know, the weekend it came out. So what is that, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? I have practically no memory of it, even with notes. That's how much of an impression this film made on me. I remember after it was over thinking, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't good, but I enjoyed it in the way that, like, if you just let yourself go for 2 hours in a movie theater, just the experience of watching, I mean, it's my kryptonite, right? Like, if you show me giant spaceships against the backdrop of space, there's a part of me, like the lizard brain Ebony, that's gonna love it. But I think it's telling that, like, I saw this movie with my boyfriend, and like 20 minutes in, he leaned over to me and he's like, "Did I miss a movie? What the fuck is happening?" This film was trying to do so much, and I'm going to attempt not to lapse into the thing I normally do, which is pointing out like ludicrous kind of plot holes or logistical missteps, like the whole planet of Exegol and the Star Destroyer like flotilla in the atmosphere. But just talk about how this movie made me feel, which is that one of the few things I am left with is my profound disappointment about how Finn was wasted as a character.
And Rose.
Absolutely. But for reasons that I'm sure are obvious, what happened with Finn, or rather does not happen with Finn, really hits me. I really liked The Force Awakens. I have seen it multiple times, and I just thought there's something about the kind of like rip-roaring, throwback kind of space opera, space western that this is. And yes, I recognize that it is in many ways directly aping, A New Hope. Whatever, I loved it, right? And I remember thinking like, yes, these are the kinds of people that I want to see in my speculative fiction and in my, fantastical worlds, people of color, women. I love it. I ate it up. And Finn's backstory, that he broke out of his imperial conditioning as a stormtrooper, and the tremendous kind of like strength of will that had to have taken, and the kind of continual like rewriting of his own programming that he has to do every day. The fact that we never see any of that never goes anywhere, just felt like such a loss. And then to have in this film the character of Jannah, who as a Black woman also is a former stormtrooper and is a leader of a group of former stormtroopers who have also broken out of their conditioning. The fact that like that says something to me as a Black viewer, and the fact that never really goes anywhere and we never talk about it. And Finn is always and already meant to be kind of a background story or background character, even in the story of his own life. Just never really sat well with me. Like, John Boyega deserves more. Finn deserves more. Finn deserves Poe. They deserve to be happy and in love. And no, like, I'm not trying to erase bisexuals. Like, yeah, Poe can date women too, but y'all know what that was about.
Yeah,
100%. Like, come on.
Well, and also, like, I 100% agree with that. And I bring up Rose too because, like, she got replaced by Jannah. Like, yeah. JJ wrote a new character that should have just been Rose.
Yes.
And so, like, what a disservice to both, what's her name, who plays Rose, and to that character. Yeah. Because what the fuck? Like, seriously. And that's why it's like, it's so frustrating because this feels more about like Hollywood egos than it feels about like doing service to media that has such a huge impact on people,
Yeah, it felt very craven, and it felt very manipulative to replace Rose with another woman of color, as if, okay, you got a woman of color, right? So you can't complain, when we recognize this for the move that it is, and how duplicitous it is. And I think the actor's name who played Jannah, Naomi Eki, like, she's wonderful, but like, give her another role. Don't make her like a pseudo Rose, like Kelly Marie Tran. She deserves more. We as an audience deserve more.
When you were talking about like your experience watching it, so I watched it I watched it this week, and my one sentence review is this movie is boring, derivative, and redundant. Like, I was so bored from the get-go. Like, I was so disappointed. And there's a thing that happens when I'm watching a really long movie like this that I just cannot get invested in, but I'm like stuck in this fucking theater and have to watch, where by the end of it, I can't quite contain myself anymore.
Did you walk out of the theater windmill punching everyone in the Alamo Draft House?
No, but what I do is like something will happen near the end and I cannot contain my outrage anymore. So when Ben and Ray start kissing, I literally yelled out, "Oh, for fuck's sake," in the middle of the theater because I just couldn't anymore. Like, I bet
angry Raylos are trying to find your address
but
right now.
I will. So apparently I'm the only person on Earth that thought that they had a sibling relationship and not like a dating relationship.
I thought that was what it was going to be too.
Everyone was like, yeah, obviously they're like, there was Ray, Kylo was the like abusive, manipulative boyfriend, and I was like, oh, now that that's said to me, I see it. But also when they kissed, I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, but Star Wars is about incest, so what? Go ahead.
Obviously, so the Reylo discussion has been very intense online these past few days, and I'm not like a person, I'm not a Reylo. Like I'm not anti-Reylo either. Like I did not have like going in. I did not have like fingers crossed. I hope such and such happens there. But I mean, I don't know. I have to say, like my position on that is, I think, different because, like, I mean, okay, for one, I admit, I think that Adam Driver is just tremendously charismatic. Like, I am low-key obsessed with Adam Driver. I think he's just a phenomenal actor, and that even in a movie like this, he rises above the material to be, like, truly just...
He acted his fucking heart out with the crap he was given.
Yeah. And so, to me, the character of Kylo Ren has always been, like, Adam Driver has always been so masterful at portraying his kind of inner, the tumultuousness. And I think his inner, the way that he's torn. So we've always known, like he's not Kilgrave. He's not like just an absolute monster with no redeeming, he has, as they say in Star Wars, he's always had good in him. We've always known that. It's just that it's been kind of overshadowed and corrupted. And Star Wars, I think that it's, because it's a myth, because it's a legend, I think because it's just a reality that we are sometimes drawn to the darkness and to things that aren't good or healthy for us. I'm sort of like, well, I think that we need to be able to explore that in myths and legends. And so when people say yeah, but he's, abusive, or yeah, but he killed his dad. I want to say I know, but it's not real. This isn't realistic. Obviously he does things that would be deal breakers in real life, but this isn't real life. It's not meant to be taken as a 1-to-1 match for I don't know.
I was with you until then, though, because I think that idea undermines everything we stand for in terms of why media is important.
Well, I mean,
it's not, none of it's real life. It's fake and it's in space, but it still represents important things.
I know, but I guess I just mean that the solution,
he can be redeemed.
Yeah, but
I guess Carol,
I guess part of what that I think that I mean, I know I know media has impact, but I think that part of the responsibility is with viewers to have a sense of the difference between mythological logic and real world logic. So to kind of say, well, we can explore things in fantasy, in a way that is where it's kind of safer and it's more okay to explore emotional and psychological territory that would in reality be unhealthy or extremely dangerous. I don't know. I
totally get it
about this, but I feel like what I had always felt Rey's sense that Ben could be redeemed. I could always feel the way that she was pulled to him from
Sure, but what does that have to do with them kissing?
Well, I guess my take on it is that while I agree that Rey and Kylo were drawn to each other, what I hoped would come out of it was perhaps a greater intimacy, but not romantic intimacy. That's where it goes left for me.
That's what I thought it was.
Because one of the things back when we talked about The Force Awakens, one of the things that I mentioned that I loved was the fact that Rey and Finn became such good friends. And I love seeing men and women simply be friends. It's one of the things that I love about Elementary, right? Just simply be friends. To have that kind of romantic, calculus kind of taken out of the equation. I would have loved to see Kylo/Ben, achieve his redemption, not via the, emotional work of a woman, which we've seen so many times before, but to achieve it on his own. And after he has earned it, to then, be worthy of an intimate relationship with Rey that, again, is not a romantic intimacy, but kind of the romantic or the intimacy of like true equals and friends. But just on a romantic level, I felt her compulsion to know him better throughout these films, but it's me. It's just my perspective. I never felt that she wanted to be with him romantically in the same way he clearly demonstrated that he wanted her. And so to have her initiate that kiss at the end, I was like, what?
Yeah, it was very confusing.
For me, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve love or he doesn't deserve his redemption. It just, for me, it came through, an engine that I've seen too many times before. And I felt that it did happen too quickly. And I recognize you got a 2-hour movie. You got to move things quickly. I get it, But also, I just am like, man, this is too easy and too pat. And there's a part of me that's like, will you end up with like a dude and a woman together? Like, fuck off.
My problem is that he dies right then because it's always so much easier for us to fully accept a male redemption arc when the act that redeems them is an act of sacrifice. Right. I would have much rather him have to live and live a better life than for him to get.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that.
Yeah, that was
that you can be redeemed. Like and live, or that you can go through the struggle that requires the hard fucking work for that. Which again, another point that the film didn't earn is that like it's not like Leia wasn't trying to reach out to him for years, but like she does it once and then he's like, "Cool, done, I'm good now."
Can I admit though that, as you say, Carol, like Adam Driver is putting all on. Black 21, like he's leaving everything on the table. Any scene with him and Harrison Ford where you see like the relationship of a father and a son, like I do love those scenes. And when we saw Han Solo in this movie, like Ghost Solo, Golo, I'm not gonna lie, I teared up, like it hit me right in my, soft center.
I don't have feelings one way or another about
Get
Adam
out
Driver.
Of here.
About Adam Driver, whatever. I'm allowed
also
to not have
acceptable.
Feelings.
Nope.
But I did enjoy, like, when he turned into Ben, clearly, like, I totally respect that he's a great actor. Like, it was very clear when he turned back into Ben. And those little moments were so, like, where he hits the wall and he goes, ow. And, like, he does the Han Solo shrug, and, like, the way he fights is a little bit different. I thought, definitely kudos to his like ability to do such a clear shift in like I am now a different person and all of that. So
one thing, okay, going back to like larger issues, one thing that I have always struggled with in the Star Wars universe, and this is by no means unique to the Star Wars franchise, this notion that we will extend grace and forgiveness to certain people no matter what their actions are, because we say they are good people. Conversely, if we have decided you are a bad person, it does not matter what good you do because you are a bad person. So there's
always been Star Wars. It's always what I don't like about Star Wars.
Yeah, and like I said, this is by no means exclusive to Star Wars. But yeah, there's also a part of me where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I kind of do want Kylo to have to reckon with the the genocide that he has spearheaded, and not get an easy death for this,
And there's like the what Carolyn was talking about at the beginning too, of how like, Rey not being of a like a monarchy of some sort. Well, I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
Like a dynasty.
A dynasty. Thank you. Looking from a dynasty and still being able to use the Force and Poe
would have been
Finn
infinitely more interesting.
Yeah, and like they're clearly like Finn has Force something and he's connected to Rey and all of this shit. Like that's all interesting and didn't go anywhere that was like useful or interesting to me at least. And so that's another thing that I'm like, there were so many opportunities to uproot, not just like have a woman who gets to be hero, but uproot the fundamental structures of regressive types of
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I think that that's one of the most disappointing things that happened is that this franchise had an opportunity to really be progressive and really like build a new model for space wars.
Yeah,
You know,
I think
like-
this film really, kind of, sunk its teeth back into like the foundational tropes of like fairy tales, whereby the blood will tell, and lineage matters, and like secret royal babies, and like power coming through essentially your DNA, which is disappointing because these films, Star Wars, are also about the joy and the authenticity of found families and making your own destiny, right? So yeah, to be like, man, oh God, just the fact that she's like, Rey Palpatine of the Exegol Palpatines, man, fuck off, JJ, like
Well,
whatever.
And there's so many things too that I'm like, it's unfortunate because there are people who don't know Star Wars lore. I am one of them. I know Palpatine from like pop culture, but I never saw the movies. So I know that he's like, it's very clear that he's a bad guy.
Well, I mean, he was the emperor, and
Yeah,
but like we see
sure,
him as a
but-
younger,
But
he's
nothing
still
was
old as
explained.
fuck.
So
but,
all of
yeah.
a sudden, there's all of that, like this whole mythology around the Sith, which you know if you know, but you don't know if you don't know. And so, who are all those fucking people that are just in this cave that are like, are they people? Are they?
Yo.
What are they? Are they drones?
Listen.
Like, what's happening? So then I was like, well, can't she just take over the Sith and then be good? And then you're like, no, I guess you can't be a Sith and a Jedi at
See,
the same
this is
time.
why
Like,
your
who
ass would be
fucking-
seduced by the dark side. You trying to do that math, it's not going
But
to work.
I'm just like, you didn't explain or give us any of this shit for people who might not know, who only now came into the franchise or whatever. I don't know. The whole thing was a fucking snooze fest. There's my review.
My big issue is, and there's so much gatekeeping happening online right now about what it means to be, a quote unquote real Star Wars fan, right? There was a tweet that was roundly mocked, and rightly so, that was like, true Star Wars fans don't just see the movies, they do some of the following: read the extended universe books,
Oh, shut the fuck up.
do this. And, but for me, like, okay, so I grew up with the original trilogy of films. And to me, when I look back at those films, that they still kind of mean something. And I think there's like a core idea there in the way that Luke ultimately wins not by using violence and domination, but by like turning off his lightsaber and by not fighting. And I feel like, this film and this whole new trilogy, of films, Rey ultimately, it seemed to me anyway, won through like by force powering, Palpatine in some way. And so I guess it seems to me that the core philosophy of like the original trilogy has now been lost, and Star Wars doesn't really stand for anything anymore, any kind of ideas. It's now just a place, a setting in which you can tell any kind of story with any kind of values. You have The Mandalorian, which is this gunslinger Western show that ends, its finale just absolutely loves. The finale loves guns.
No spoilers. Okay.
I'm just saying the finale loves
Yeah.
guns. Like, so it's a very like gun heavy, show, and I don't know. To me, like, I kind of want to just pretend that nothing outside of that original trilogy 4 through 6 exists. Again, go back to that, because at least to me, when there were just those, like, Star Wars had some kind of core philosophy that it stood for, and now it doesn't mean anything anymore, and it just keeps perpetuating itself to make tons more money, but there isn't like a guiding ethos to it anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like we I would love to do a special episode where we talk about the franchise as a whole, and bring in Rogue One and Solo and all of the different cinematic iterations, and The Mandalorian too. But I think, there's whatever. We don't got the time, y'all. We ain't got the time
Or the resolve. That
Well,
sounds horrible
I have the
to me.
resolve, but it's
y'all
easy
can
to
do it without me.
Do
it's
I have
fine.
the follow through? Unlikely.
Yeah, it's unlikely. But tweet at Ebony Astor and beg her for this special episode that I will not have anything to do with.
At me at Babalu Freq, and I will be sure to answer your messages.
All right, y'all. We will be right back with our weekly freakouts.
Hey, FFR listeners. Did you know that if you join our Patreon community, you can get nifty perks like early access, exclusive weekly bonus segments, access to our friendly Discord, and more? That's right, you can get cool stuff and help us keep doing FFR at the same time. What are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/femfreak.
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past weeks. Since we have more time to come up with our freakouts, which are not always easy. Mm-hmm. Who's got something?
I'll go first. I admit I held on to this one for a little while, and maybe now the moment has passed, but I wanted to strategically deploy this freakout, which is Rian Johnson's film, Knives Out.
I want to see this.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
Knives Out is a sort of classic style whodunit in terms of its structure. You know, it's a really fun kind of playful movie that it just in the way that it's put together. It feels very much like a throwback, and simultaneously it feels very much of the moment, because it's definitely really about wealth and privilege and white America. And certainly, like, it has provoked important, larger conversations. And I think that, some people who come from a background, some people who are, immigrants to this country, have raised concerns about, about the way that the film uses, narratively kind of deploys concerns about immigrants to the United States. But for me, as a white viewer who, I enjoyed the way that I think this film doesn't let any of its white characters off the hook, which, was something that I really appreciated, except maybe for what the character who's killed off early on. But pretty much even the white characters who you think early on are sympathetic or nice, or the quote unquote good ones, it kind of does things that delve into their privilege and their perception of the world, through their experience. And so anyway, it's a really smart movie, I think, that has a lot of things to say about the moment we're in right now. And also it just works really well as a kind of classic, twisty whodunit with Daniel Craig is just fantastic to watch as this Southern, this remarkable, Southern kind of private eye. So anyway, I highly recommend Knives Out.
Sweet. Ebony.
Okay, so my freak out is the current mishigas with the Romance Writers of America and Courtney Milan. And I don't know.
You gotta give context.
I
will. Like you just said.
I will. So this is a story that is bubbling outside of the romance sphere into non-romance centric media. So I will not be surprised if after this you start to see this, because it has been written about in The Guardian, the New York Times, whatever. Excuse me. Shortly before Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, Courtney Milan, who is a Chinese American romance writer, she is a lawyer. She has been and continues to be a really fierce advocate for diversity in romance, and as a former board member and former chair of the ethics committee of the Romance Writers of America, was censured by that organization because she pointed out, but she was by no means the only person to point out, but because she has a fairly sizable social media following, and because she is a woman of color, she was unsurprisingly singled out for this, pointing out that this particular author had written a book in the 90s that was, as she described it, a racist mess. It has a Chinese American heroine. It's exoticizing. It's racist, as Courtney says. Anyways, this cabal of, as they're called, nice white ladies, made a complaint to the Romance Writers of America, which is the professional organization for romance writers.
They complained that she
said essentially
something about a book from the 90s?
Right, and that, essentially she was being a bully, she was mobilizing Twitter mobs. You know the script, right?
Oh, boy.
The Romance Writers of America upheld this complaint. And by the way, I will link you to Twitter threads that lay out this whole story in both greater detail, but also greater simplicity. It's both incredibly complicated and very easy to understand because it's the same sort of thing that happens when any, person of color, anybody from a marginalized background speaks out. So the Romance Writers of America, the RWA, they suspended Courtney's membership for a year. They barred her from a lifetime of holding leadership positions. This blew up and became a much larger conversation about the ways that the romance genre or certain segments of the romance genre, i.e. the white privileged portions, continue to refuse to cede any space on the stage for people who are not like them, people who are not straight, people who are not white, people who are not privileged. And it's just been a horrifying kind of thing to witness, but it's also been gratifying in that you really see who your allies are. I don't see, as someone who's not a member of RWA, but who is an avid romance reader, who participates in a lot of these conversations, who knows some of these people, I do not see how the RWA survives as an organization past this point. What's come to light since, before Christmas with the whole Courtney Milan situation is just some, malfeasance, larger malfeasance on the part of the board. But anyways, it's an fascinating and I think really trenchant kind of conversation that goes beyond just the romance genre, but about, culture more broadly, And as, former president of RWA, Helen Kate Diamond has said, these are people who have had 90% of everything for so long that when they look up one day and see that they have 80%, rather than saying, hey, I got 80%, they're mad because they want to know where their 10% went.
Yeah, it's like that quote that Lori Penny says, or from Lori Penny that says, when you're
accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Yeah, that's the one.
Exactly. So anyways, I'll link you to the story. It's very, like I said, this is a conversation that has bubbled outwards. So many of you will have heard about this, but many outlets are talking about it now.
Cool. That's fucked up.
It is fucked up.
So I have a freak out, but before I want to just really briefly acknowledge that yesterday at the time of this recording, the U.S. murdered the second top official in Iran, which is all likely going to lead us towards war in the Middle East.
More war.
Yeah, continued war, but especially with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And Iraq is going to be caught up in that as well. So anyways, I just want to acknowledge that this is actually quite a terrifying moment, and it feels very, very much like after 9/11 in some ways, where we are just sitting there for a while waiting for things to happen, where the government is saying that there are things and reasons for this, but not showing any evidence for those reasons for this kind of action. And it's pretty terrifying. So if you thought 2020 was going to be a better year, psych. But, as, having family in that region and having friends from family, it's, a lot of us are very much on edge. And also just I just want to urge us to recognize that America doesn't feel war. We don't feel here on our land and on our daily lives typically when we drone the fuck out of the rest of the world, and we drone and that's what wars are these days, right? They're not equitable. Not that they're ever equitable, but they're not sending soldiers in and battles on the streets as much as there are Americans who are in bunkers who, electronically drop bombs on different on people, and the casualties are enormous. So, our lives are not more valuable. And we are in such a politically divided moment, which, I know we just talked about that with Star Wars, but it's all very relevant and related in how we view humanity and each other and political stuff. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for folks out there who are struggling and frustrated and a little bit scared about what's coming up. But now I'm going to do my actual freak out. So Cameron Hurley's Stars Are Legion has been on my reading wish list forever, and I finally read it. And y'all, this fucking book. So I literally I'm incapable of describing this book because it is so indescribable that I'm just going to read you the blurb so that you have some idea of what it is about. Somewhere on the outer rim of the universe, a mass of decaying world ships known as the Legion is traveling in the seams between the stars. Here in the darkness, a war for control of the Legion has been waged for generations with no clear resolution. As worlds continue to die, a desperate plan is put into motion. Zan wakes up with no memory, prisoner of a people who say they are her family. She's told she is their salvation, the only person capable of boarding the Mokshi, a world ship with the power to leave the Legion. But Zan's new family is not the only one desperate to gain control of the prized ship. Zan finds that she must choose sides in a genocidal campaign that will take her from the edges of the Legion's gravity well to the very belly of the world. Zan will soon learn that she carries the seeds of the Legion's destruction and its possible salvation. But can she and the band of cast-off followers she has gathered survive the horrors of the Legion and its people long enough to deliver it? So I've tried to explain this book to people, and I literally, I had to read that yes, that's what it's about, but it's so much more than this. It has, one of my favorite things is living ships, but the ships are also worlds in this context. And they're because Zan has lost her memory and we're learning about things through this character whose memory has been gone for some reason. We don't know why. It appears that it's been wiped. That, there's little things where it's like, well, the word for ship and world is the same word. So I don't know if they mean ship or world, right? The characters are super compelling. You're both following Zan, who has no memory, and this other woman who, you're kind of like, there's something shady going on here. And you're not fully telling Zan why she doesn't have a memory anymore. And it is absolutely unrelenting. At every moment, you're like, holy fuck. It is not forgiving. It is kind of brutal, and it is absolutely brilliant. So Cameron Hurley, The Stars Are Legion, highly recommend reading it.
Listen, the minute you say world ships, the seams between the stars, you could there are just certain words that all of my sensors start tuning in.
Yes.
Into it.
And I give good book reviews.
Yeah, you do. Y'all, listen, I waited so long to read the Steerswoman series, even though Anita talked about it from basically the first moment I got hired. And then I did read them, and I was like, I'm scared to finish the final book because the last one's not out yet, and I don't know what I'm gonna do.
There's 2 more that haven't been written for 20 years.
And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. These books are phenomenal.
Yeah. This one is amazing. And I will say this, I was debating whether I should mention this or not. The entire universe is just women. There are no men in this entire world, and it doesn't matter, and you don't really notice it until you notice it. It's not addressed, it's not acknowledged, and I think that Cameron Hurley was just like, I wonder if I could make a story that's just all women. So I think that, and I didn't know that going into it either. I just eventually was like, wait a minute, there literally has been no he pronouns at all. And so that also creates an interesting dynamic about conflict and evilness and who's manipulation and all of these different things. There's really interesting stuff happening around pregnancy and reproduction and which is not anything that you're imagining it being. So go read it. It's so good.
Anita's freaking out. She is literally freaking out.
It's a literal freak out for sure. All right, you can submit your own freak out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, only available to backers of this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. In the upcoming weeks, we will be talking about The Witcher, the new show on Netflix. And we're going to try to do a wrap-up of The Mandalorian. So you can listen to our previous episode that talked about the first 3 episodes. That's a lot of words of episodes. Sorry. You probably understand what I mean. But now that the show is done, we want to come back and let you know what we thought about it. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. And if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreq. The show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus, which I can't believe Ebony wants to destroy.
I don't. Replace. No, never. Oh, man. Phil's going to be listening to this and be like, betrayal.
Exactly. Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Bye.
Bye.
Later.